The rain in Seoul had a cruel rhythm that night, soft at first, then sharp like memories that refused to fade. Priscilla walked fast, clutching her umbrella against the wind, her heels splashing through shallow puddles on the quiet street. The city lights blurred behind her, red, gold, and lonely. She just left work, her phone buzzing every few seconds in her coat pocket. She didn't want to look. She didn't need to. She already knew who it was. Han Jae-min, her ex, the man who had once kissed her forehead while planning her pain behind her back. The man who made love feel like punishment. It had been a year since she left him, yet he refused to let her go. His voice still haunted her dreams. Sometimes soft, sometimes screaming, always there. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wouldn't stop. Priscilla froze in the middle of the street, her breath trembling. She finally picked up, pressing the phone to her ear. "Why do you keep running from me, Priscilla?" His voice slithered through the speaker, low and familiar. "You can't hide forever. You're mine." Her throat tightened. "I told you to stop calling me Jae-min," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If I can't have you, no one will," he said calmly. "You think I don't know where you work? Where you live? You think you're safe?" Her hands shook. Her heart raced so fast she could hear it in her ears. She turned around, scanning the dim street. Her reflection glowed faintly in a cafe window, and for a second, she thought she saw him behind her. She panicked, and then, as if heaven itself intervened, she saw him. A tall man stepped out of a black Maybach parked near the curb. Black suit, silver watch, umbrella in one hand, phone in the other. Calm, elegant, dangerous. The streetlight touched his face. Strong jaw, slicked back hair, and eyes so deep they looked carved from the night. He was walking past, clearly not interested in anyone, when she rushed toward him, her words tumbling out in fear. "Please," she gasped, clutching his arm. "Pretend you're my husband, please, just for a minute." He won't stop calling. He didn't ask a single question, didn't hesitate. The man looked at her, her trembling lips, the terror in her eyes, and something flickered behind his calm expression. Then he reached for her waist. Smoothly, confidently, he pulled her close, his voice low, rich and steady. "Sweetheart," he said into the phone still in her hand. "Why are you calling my wife at this hour?" Priscilla froze. The tone, soft yet commanding, sent chills down her spine. "Who the hell are you?" Jae-min hissed on the other end. "Her husband," the stranger replied smoothly. "Now, if you don't want trouble, don't ever call her again. Because next time, I'll answer in person." There was silence. Then the line went dead. The man took her phone gently, ended the call completely, and placed it in her palm. He didn't let go of her waist. "You can breathe now," he said softly. "He's gone." Priscilla stepped back, embarrassed, words fumbling. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to grab you like that. I was just scared." He finished for her, eyes warm but unreadable. "I saw that." For a moment, all she could hear was the rain. His coat was damp, his cologne thick with sandalwood and smoke. Everything about him screamed power. Quiet, heavy, confident power. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't know what else to do." "No thanks needed," he replied, slipping his hands into his pockets. "But you owe me an explanation." His words weren't harsh, just smooth, like velvet wrapped around steel. "Why did you need me to pretend to be your husband, stranger?" Priscilla hesitated. Something about his tone made her feel safe, not judged, just seen. So she told him, not everything but enough, about the ex who wouldn't let go, the threats, the nights she cried alone in her apartment. He listened silently, eyes locked on her face, every blink, slow and deliberate. When she finished, he nodded once. "You don't have to explain more. You did what you had to do," he said quietly. "But if he calls again," he paused, his lips curving slightly, "you tell him your husband's name is Min Hae-jun." She blinked. "Your what?" "My name," he said, with a half smile that felt dangerous and kind all at once. "Now it's real, isn't it?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't owe me anything, But I don't like seeing women tremble in fear, especially not beautiful ones. Her heart stumbled. Something about him felt both safe and terrifying. The way his confidence wrapped around her like armor, yet his tone soothed like a lullaby. Are you? She began, but he interrupted with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. A man you should stay away from, he said softly. But I have a feeling you won't. And he was right, because from that night, something began between them. Something neither of them planned for. The next time he appeared, it was outside her workplace. The time after that, at her cafe. And every time, her heart learned a new rhythm. One that sounded a lot like his name. Min Hae-jun. The stranger who called her wife. The man who would one day teach her that love could heal, even when it came from the darkest heart and soul. For 3 days after that rainy night, Priscilla replayed the moment in her head like a movie she couldn't turn off. The way he'd said, "Sweetheart," the calm command in his voice, the look in his eyes, steady, unreadable, but strangely safe. She told herself it was nothing, just a stranger helping a frightened woman. But why did she still feel that warmth in her chest every time she thought of him? Soul sparkled like liquid glass that Thursday evening. Priscilla left the office later than usual, arms heavy with folders, brain buzzing from deadlines. Her colleagues were heading to karaoke, laughing, calling her to join. She smiled politely and said she was tired. Tired, that word had become her armor. It was easier than saying afraid. When she stepped outside, the autumn air carried a clean chill. Streetlights hummed. Her phone stayed silent, and that alone felt like a miracle. Maybe Jaemin had finally stopped. Maybe that mysterious man's warning had worked. She was halfway down the block when she saw the car. A black Maybach, parked right across the street. Engine off, windows tinted. Her heart jumped. For a moment she thought, no, it can't be him. Then the door opened. He stepped out with the same quiet authority, buttoning his coat as if he had all the time in the world. A few pedestrians turned to look. Even in a city obsessed with appearances, this man drew attention without trying. Leaving work late again? His voice came, deep and smooth, perfectly calm. Priscilla's breath caught. You remembered me? He gave a small smile, almost teasing. Hard to forget the woman who called me her husband. Heat flooded her cheeks. I'm sorry about that night. Don't apologize, he said, crossing the street. You needed help. I offered it. Simple. But there was nothing simple about the way he looked at her. Steady, protective, as if he was quietly scanning the world for threats. When he stopped in front of her, the city noise dimmed. Did he call again? He asked. She shook her head. No, not once. Good. He nodded slowly. That means he listened. He sounded satisfied, almost relieved. Then softer. You shouldn't walk home alone. I'm used to it. Doesn't mean you should. His gaze flicked to the folder she carried. Let me drop you off. She hesitated. Every rule she'd built for herself, no men, no risk, no new connections, flashed like warning signs. Yet, somehow, standing before him didn't feel like danger. Felt like stillness after a storm. All right, she said quietly. Inside the car, silence settled between them, comfortable and strange. The leather smelled expensive, faintly mixed with cedar. The city lights streaked across his face as they drove, illuminating his sharp features. The faint line of the serpent tattoo curling against his neck, the reflection of soul in his dark eyes. He spoke first. So, Priscilla Monroe from New York. She blinked. How do you know my name? He smiled, not boastful, just honest. I have ways of finding things out. I wanted to be sure you were safe. Are you always this protective of strangers? Only the interesting ones. Her pulse stuttered. You don't even know me. He looked ahead, one hand resting on the steering wheel. I know fear when I see it, and I know strength when it fights to hide behind fear. You have both. The words landed softly, like a hand on her shoulder. No one had ever described her that way. When they reached her apartment building, he stepped out first, opened her door, and held out an umbrella before the drizzle could touch her. Stay near people. And if he calls again, you tell me, he said. She frowned. Why would you care? He met her eyes. Because I said I was your husband once. I take my words seriously. Then he turned, walked back to his car, and disappeared into the Seoul night, leaving her staring after the red taillights until they were gone. 2 weeks passed. No calls from Jaemin. No sign of the mysterious man. Priscilla began sleeping better. Work improved. She even laughed more with So-yeon, her lively colleague who teased her endlessly about the handsome stranger. It was Friday night when her phone finally rang again. She froze, expecting the old terror to return. But it wasn't Jaemin's number. It was an unknown one. "Hello?" she said carefully. "You sound better," a deep voice replied. Her heart skipped. "Hey June, you remember my voice," he said, amusement lacing his tone. "Good. I was beginning to think I'd scared you off. What do you want?" she asked, though her voice softened without meaning to. "Dinner," he said simply. "You owe me an explanation, remember? I told you everything that night." "Not everything," he said. "I want to know the part that made you swear off love." Silence. Then she whispered, "That's not an easy story." "Then I'll listen slowly." Something in the gentleness of those words disarmed her. Against her better judgment, she agreed. The restaurant he chose sat on the top floor of a hotel overlooking the Han River. Candlelight, soft jazz, panoramic windows, the kind of place where time itself seemed to move slower. When she arrived, he was already there, standing to greet her. He looked devastating in a dark suit, his tattoo just visible above his collar. "You look lovely," he said, pulling her chair out for her. "And you look dangerous," she replied before she could stop herself. He chuckled quietly. "Some people pay me to look that way." Dinner began lightly, food, travel, work. Then his tone shifted. "Tell me about him," he said. Priscilla stared at the river's reflection. "He was charming, kind, until he wasn't. He told me I'd never find anyone better. And after a while, I believed him. I stayed too long. When I finally left, I wasn't sure who I was anymore." He listened without interruption, eyes steady, expression unreadable. When she finished, he reached across the table, not touching her hand but close enough for her to feel his warmth. "Pain doesn't erase your worth," he said. "It just hides it until someone reminds you." The words were simple, but they broke something open inside her. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, really seen. As the night ended, he insisted on driving her home again. They stopped by the river, city lights rippling over the water. He stepped out, leaning against the car, looking at the skyline. She joined him, curiosity rising. "What do you actually do, Hae-jun?" He glanced at her, that small, knowing smile returning. "Investments, real estate, a little of everything." "Legal?" she teased. He tilted his head. "Mostly." She laughed, thinking he was joking, but his eyes held a depth she couldn't read. "I keep my world separate, Priscilla," he said quietly. "You don't need to worry about what happens in the dark. You belong in the light." The wind caught her hair, brushing it across his hand. He gently tucked the strand behind her ear, his fingers lingering just long enough to make her heart stumble. "Get some rest," he murmured. "The world feels lighter when you sleep." He opened the car door for her again. By the time she turned to thank him, he was already walking away toward his Maybach, coat flowing behind him like a shadow that owned the night. That night, lying in bed, Priscilla stared at her ceiling, trying to slow her racing heart. Something about him both comforted and terrified her. He felt like safety wrapped in secrets, and somewhere, deep down, she knew, whatever world Min Hae-jun truly belonged to, it was already pulling her in. The rain poured heavily that night, tracing long silver lines down Priscilla's window. She had just gotten back from work, too tired to even cook. Her mind was a maze of mixed emotions. For weeks now, her life had been strangely peaceful, though her heart refused to stay calm. Every time she remembered Min Hae-jun's voice, that deep and confident tone, she would lose focus. He had a strange way of speaking, soft yet commanding, dangerous yet gentle. He had kept his word since that night on the street. The calls from her ex had completely stopped. She never saw him around her office again, and the fear that once gripped her slowly faded. But Heijun's presence in her life had become something she could no longer ignore. He texted her every morning. Not the kind of messages men send to flirt, but short, thoughtful ones. Did you sleep well? Don't skip breakfast. The weather will change today. Carry an umbrella. They sounded simple, but they carried weight. They made her feel safe again. Seen again. Sometimes, she would see his car parked at a distance when she left work late. She never asked why he was there. Maybe part of her already knew he was watching to make sure she reached home safe. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, she heard a knock at her door. Her heart leapt. Somehow, she didn't even need to ask who it was. She opened it quietly, and there he stood. Heijun was drenched in rain, hair slicked back, black coat clinging to his tall frame. Water dripped from his shoulders, but he looked as composed as ever. His neck tattoo peaked slightly above his collar, and the sight of it made her pulse race. He looked like sin wrapped in elegance. "You're soaked," she said softly. "You'll catch a cold." He smiled faintly, stepping inside without waiting for her to insist. "I've been through worse storms, Angel." That nickname again. Every time he said it, her chest fluttered. She closed the door behind him and brought him a towel. He didn't use it immediately. Instead, he watched her silently, his dark eyes following her every move. "Why do you always look at me like that?" she asked, trying to sound playful. "Because you don't know what you do to me," he said calmly, voice low and certain. Her heart skipped. No hesitation. No games. He meant what he said. "I was worried about you," he continued, finally drying his hands. "There's been movement near your building lately. Men I don't recognize." Her stomach tightened. "You think my ex?" "Maybe," he cut in, "but I'll find out. You don't need to be scared anymore." The confidence in his tone wasn't arrogance. It was assurance. The kind that made her trust him without question. She sighed and walked to the small kitchenette. "You want some tea?" "Only if you drink with me." She smiled faintly, filling 2 mugs. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was warm, almost intimate. When she sat beside him, the distance between them was barely a breath. "You work too hard," he murmured, watching her stir her tea. "You barely sleep. You notice everything, don't you?" "I have to," he said. "It's how I've stayed alive this long." She looked at him, trying to read beyond his words. "What do you mean by that?" He took a slow sip before answering. "The kind of life I live, Priscilla. It's not simple. I deal with people who don't play fair. I protect what's mine by any means necessary." His tone was casual, but there was something dark beneath it. Something real. She wanted to ask, "Who are you really, Heijun?" But instead, she whispered, "And am I one of the things you protect?" He turned his head slowly, eyes meeting hers. "Not a thing, Angel. But yes, I'd protect you." There was no space left between them. She could feel his breath against her skin. For a brief moment, she forgot every wall she had built. When his fingers brushed the back of her hand, her heart gave in completely. They sat like that for minutes, just staring, no words, no need to fill the silence. The city outside was loud, but inside that small apartment, there was peace. He broke the silence first. "I had someone follow your ex today," he said quietly. "He's been asking questions about where you live. But he won't come near you again." She looked at him, startled. "You followed him?" "I don't let threats breathe twice," he replied simply. His tone should have scared her, but it didn't. It only reminded her that she was safe for the first time in years. "Why are you doing all this for me?" she asked finally. He smiled slightly, his gaze softening. "Because the day you ran to me, pretending I was your husband, something inside me changed. No one's ever looked at me with that much fear and trust at the same time. I can't explain it, Angel. But from that moment, I knew I'd never let anyone hurt you again." Her eyes watered. No one had ever said something that sincere to her before. She wanted to tell him she was scared of loving again, scared of losing control. But instead, she whispered, "Thank you." He leaned back, studying her face with quiet admiration. "You don't need to thank me. Just promise me one thing." "What?" If I ever tell you to trust me, even when everything seems wrong, will you? She nodded. Yes. His lips curved into that soft, dangerous smile again. Good. Because the world I live in doesn't forgive weakness. But you, he paused, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. You make me want to live differently. Her breath caught. For a man who moved like a storm, his words felt like calm rain. The thunder outside roared louder, and for the first time in years, Priscilla didn't flinch at the sound. She leaned against his shoulder, her heart steady for once. He stayed with her until she fell asleep on the couch. When she woke up hours later, he was gone. But there was a note on the table, written in neat, precise handwriting. You're safe. Always. H. Her lips curved into a sleepy smile. But, as she folded the note, she noticed something strange on the windowsill. A small silver coin engraved with a dragon. It didn't belong to him. Her peace faded in seconds. Someone else had been there. And though she didn't know it yet, that coin would be the beginning of everything that unraveled next. Priscilla couldn't sleep that night. The rain had stopped, but her thoughts hadn't. That small silver coin sat on her bedside table, gleaming faintly under the dim light. She had touched it over and over, hoping it would make sense. But the more she looked at it, the more uneasy she felt. It wasn't from Hae-jun. She knew his style by now. Everything about him was clean, sharp, intentional. That coin felt different. It had weight, both physical and symbolic. A dragon carved in the center, scales raised in perfect detail, as if it belonged to a world she didn't understand. By morning, she decided to take it to work with her, slipping it into her bag. But even in the bright daylight of Seoul, she couldn't shake off the strange heaviness. It felt like an omen, whispering something she wasn't ready to hear. Work that day dragged. Her colleagues chatted about the weekend, new makeup brands, office gossip. She smiled where she needed to, but her mind was elsewhere. The thought of Hae-jun's face when he told her to trust him, even when things look wrong, kept looping in her head. What if the coin was the first sign of what he meant? When she finally clocked out and stepped into the cold evening, his car was already waiting by the curb. He leaned against it, coat buttoned, expression unreadable. You look like you've been thinking too much, he said softly. I found something. Her words made him straighten slightly. She reached into her purse and handed him the coin. His eyes fell on it, and for a brief second, something flickered in his gaze. Recognition, then anger, then control. Where did you get this? I found it on my window after you left. He said nothing for a moment, just stared at the coin, jaw tightening. Then he slipped it into his pocket and looked at her with that same calm confidence. You did the right thing telling me. Don't mention this to anyone. Who does it belong to? He exhaled slowly, eyes softening as if trying to protect her from a truth she wasn't ready for. Someone who used to be part of my past. Someone who shouldn't be anywhere near you. His tone was quiet, but there was weight in every word. I don't understand, Hae-jun. I thought you said I was safe. You are. I'll make sure of it. He opened the car door and gestured for her to get in. We're not staying here tonight. She hesitated, but there was something in his voice, firm, commanding yet careful, that made her obey. The car ride was silent, filled only with the low hum of the engine and the steady beat of her anxious heart. They drove out of the city and into the quieter outskirts, where the lights dimmed and the streets grew narrow. Finally, they stopped at a tall, glass-walled building that didn't look like a house. It looked like a fortress. Where are we? She whispered. My home, he said simply. The real one. He led her inside. The air smelled of cedar and smoke. Everything was sleek. Black marble floors, dim lighting, art that looked ancient and expensive. The silence was heavy, almost royal. Stay close to me, he murmured. She followed him into an elevator that opened directly into a penthouse. The walls were glass, the view breathtaking. Seoul glittered far below them like a sleeping dragon itself. This is where you live? She asked softly. This is where I hide, he corrected. He poured her a glass of water, watching her hands tremble slightly. You're shaking. I'm not used to this, she admitted. Everything about you feels like a dream I shouldn't be living. He smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time you start believing you deserve it. She looked at him, heart racing. Who are you really, Hae-jun? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he removed his coat and unbuttoned his shirt just enough for her to see the tattoo on his neck. Black ink, shaped like the same dragon from the coin. Her breath caught. That's the same symbol. He nodded slowly. It used to mean loyalty. Now it means war. She stared at him in disbelief. War with who? With a man who doesn't respect peace anymore. His voice was quiet, but his eyes burned. That coin wasn't left as a threat. It was a message. Message to who? To me, he said simply. Her chest tightened. I don't want to get dragged into your battles. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. You won't. Not while I'm breathing. His words were a promise, and though she didn't fully understand his world, she believed him. The confidence in his tone, the sincerity in his eyes, it all melted her fear. He took her hand gently. You trusted me once, Angel. I need you to trust me again. This world I'm in, it's full of masks, full of shadows. But you're the only light I've got. Her heart broke at the softness of his confession. Why me, Hae-jun? Because you didn't want anything from me? He said, brushing his thumb over her fingers. You didn't even know who I was when you ran to me. That day, when you clung to my coat, you looked like someone trying to breathe again. And he paused, taking a slow breath. I wanted to be the reason you could. Tears welled in her eyes. She had never felt so seen, so wanted without being used. He led her to the large balcony where the city lights danced below. From this height, he said softly, everything looks peaceful, but down there it's chaos. That's what I've lived my whole life. Chaos hidden under beauty. She looked up at him, the wind brushing against her hair. And where do I fit in that picture? You, he said quietly, are the peace I never thought I'd find. For a long time, they stood there in silence, the world beneath them glowing faintly. The dragon coin, the tattoo, the warnings. All of it faded for a brief, fragile moment. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked down at it, and his expression changed instantly. Go inside, Angel, he said, his voice suddenly cold. What's wrong? Please, he said, softly, eyes scanning the skyline. Just go. She obeyed, though her heart raced. Through the glass wall, she watched him take the call. His jaw clenched, and his whole body stiffened. He said nothing, just listened. When he finally ended the call, his face was unreadable. She waited for him to speak, but he only walked to her, kissed her forehead gently, and whispered, everything's fine. But she could see it in his eyes, it wasn't. And as the night deepened over Seoul, Priscilla realized that the moment she found that coin, her life had changed forever. Priscilla woke to the sound of low murmurs in the distance. For a moment she thought she was dreaming, the husky timbre of Hae-jun's voice, the faint echo of another man replying in Korean. Then she realized it was real. She was still in his penthouse. The previous night came rushing back. The coin, the call, his expression hardening like stone. She sat up on the couch, clutching the soft blanket he had covered her with. Morning light poured through the huge windows, painting the room in gold. Everything looked peaceful, but the air felt thick with secrets. When she stood and peeked down the hall, she saw him by the floor-to-ceiling window, phone pressed to his ear. His back was to her, posture straight, shoulders tense. Even from that distance she could sense the authority in him, the calm power that never needed to shout. He turned slightly, noticed her watching, and ended the call. The moment their eyes met, his face softened. You're awake, he said. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, she replied. You sounded worried. He smiled faintly, walking toward her. I was only handling business. Nothing for you to worry about. That's what people always say right before everything goes wrong. He stopped in front of her, amused by her boldness. You're learning to read me too well. I'm trying, she said quietly, because every day with you feels like standing between sunlight and storm. I never know which one you'll bring. He reached out, brushing his fingers through her hair. Maybe both. She wanted to smile, but instead she looked at the faint mark on his neck where the tattoo curved. That coin. It really scared you, didn't it? He didn't answer immediately. It reminded me that the past doesn't die just because you walk away from it. Can't you let it go? Some ghosts don't let me go, he said. Then, forcing a lighter tone, come, you haven't eaten. He guided her to the kitchen area, if it could even be called that. The counters gleamed, untouched by clutter. He made her breakfast himself, quiet and precise, as if he'd been doing it his whole life. Watching him crack eggs and pour coffee felt strange. Men like him weren't supposed to do ordinary things. Why are you being so calm after last night? She asked. Because calm keeps people alive. He glanced up with a crooked smile. And because I like seeing you breathe easy. Something in his voice wrapped around her heart. She looked down at her plate, pretending not to blush. They ate together in companionable silence. Then he stood, placed his dishes in the sink, and said softly, "There's somewhere I want to take you." "Where?" "Somewhere that'll help you understand who I am without scaring you away." She followed him to the elevator. It carried them down past floor after floor until they reached an underground level she hadn't seen before. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that looked nothing like the penthouse above. Dim lights. A long corridor lined with old photographs and calligraphy scrolls. "What is this place?" "My father built it," he said quietly. "Long before he died. It's where I learned discipline, loyalty, how to survive, and how to hide everything that hurts." He led her into a small chamber filled with swords, old coins, and documents framed behind glass. "The dragon," he explained, pointing to one of the engravings, "was his emblem. It meant protection, not war. But people twisted it after he was gone. That coin you found. It came from a man who betrayed him." She touched the glass, tracing the image. "So whoever left it was reminding you of that betrayal." He nodded slowly. "It's not the first warning, but it's the first time they've come this close to you. That changes everything." "Maybe you should let me go," she whispered. "If I stay, I'll be a target too." His hand came to her cheek. "No, you're the only part of my life that isn't built on fear. If I lose that, I lose myself." The tenderness in his tone broke her resolve. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. Later, back upstairs, she walked to the balcony alone while he took another call. The city stretched beneath her, glittering under the pale afternoon sun. For the first time, she saw Seoul not as a place of strangers, but as the world where her heart was learning to beat again. When he joined her, his expression was unreadable. "They're moving quickly," he said quietly. "I need to leave town for a few days." Her chest tightened. "You're leaving? I'll make sure someone stays near you. You won't even notice them. I don't want guards. I want you." He looked at her for a long time before answering. "That's the first time you've said that." "I mean it." He smiled, small and sincere. "Then promise me you'll stay here while I'm gone. No wandering. No fear." She nodded, though part of her already dreaded the silence his absence would bring. That evening they didn't speak much. He sat beside her on the couch, reading something on his tablet while she rested her head on his shoulder. The quiet between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was heavy with things unspoken. When he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. "Come back to me," she whispered. "I will." He kissed her forehead lightly. "And when I do, I'll tell you everything." She watched him disappear into the elevator, the echo of his promise lingering in the air. The penthouse felt enormous without him. Hours passed. She tried to distract herself by tidying up, but curiosity led her to the small desk he always kept locked. This time it wasn't. Inside lay a single photograph. Young Hae-jun with another man, both dressed in black suits, smiling like brothers. And beside the photo, a letter written in Korean characters she couldn't read, signed with the same dragon emblem. She closed the drawer quickly, her heart pounding. Whatever world he belonged to, it wasn't as simple as she wanted to believe. Yet the thought of walking away never crossed her mind. That night she stood by the window, holding his note from before. "You're safe. Always," she whispered to the skyline. "You better keep that promise, Hae-jun." Outside, the wind picked up, scattering the last drops of rain against the glass. Somewhere in the distance, a car engine roared and faded into the night. Priscilla didn't know it yet, but the next dawn would bring the first real test of that promise, and the beginning of a love that neither danger nor distance could undo. The morning after Hae-jun left, Priscilla woke to silence. Not the gentle kind, but the eerie quiet that hums when something feels off. The city outside was already alive. Honking taxis, murmuring crowds, but inside the penthouse, the air was still, like it was holding its breath. She stretched a little on the couch, wrapped in one of his oversized shirts. It smelled faintly of him, wood, smoke, and that subtle cologne that lingered like a secret. Every corner of the penthouse reminded her of him. His glass of half-drunk whiskey on the shelf, his jacket on the chair, the faint trail of his cologne near the door. It had only been a few hours, yet it felt like he had taken all the warmth with him. She walked to the window and stared down at the streets below. Seoul shimmered beneath the morning sun. Clean, orderly, unaware of the chaos that lived beneath its perfection. She whispered to herself, "You'll be fine, Priscilla." He said, "You're safe." But then she saw it, across the street on the corner cafe's patio. A man in a black coat sipping coffee and pretending to read a newspaper. He hadn't moved in 20 minutes. Her heart skipped. Could that be one of Hae-jun's guards? She pulled the curtain halfway and kept watching. The man never looked up, but she noticed the earpiece in his ear, the subtle tension in his jaw. Yes, he wasn't just an ordinary person. A strange comfort washed over her. He really did mean it when he said she'd be protected. Still, it was strange being under someone's watchful eyes. She sighed and turned back into the apartment. By noon, she decided to step outside. She needed air and maybe a taste of normal life. She wore a simple beige coat, tied her braids back, and headed to a small art shop 2 blocks away. Painting had always been her escape, long before life in Korea turned complicated. As she walked, she felt it again, that presence. Someone was behind her. She turned once, saw nothing but a black sedan parked by the roadside. "Relax, Priscilla," she muttered under her breath. "You're just paranoid." But her instincts were rarely wrong. Inside the shop, she picked up new brushes, a small sketchbook, and a few paints. The elderly shopkeeper smiled kindly, speaking slow Korean for her to understand. For a moment, she felt peace again, until her phone vibrated. Unknown number. "You shouldn't walk alone, sweetheart." Her hands trembled. She knew that tone, that message, her ex, the one who couldn't let go. She quickly deleted the text, heart racing. The security guard outside, the car. It all suddenly felt too thin a wall between her and danger. She rushed back home, locking every door twice. That night, she couldn't sleep. The penthouse, once warm, now felt haunted by silence. She turned on the TV for background noise, scrolled through her phone, and tried sketching, but nothing eased the tightness in her chest. Finally, she sat on the floor near the big window, hugging her knees. The city lights glittered like stars fallen to the ground. She whispered, "Hae-jun, please come back soon." As if answering her, her phone buzzed. "Hae-jun, are you safe?" She smiled weakly. "Yes, I miss you." "Hae-jun, I miss you too. Stay inside. I'll explain everything when I return." She typed, "I got a message from him." A few seconds later, his reply came. "Don't answer. Don't go near any window tonight." Her stomach twisted. She dropped the phone and turned off the lights. The only glow came from the city outside. She crawled to the window quietly and peered through a tiny gap in the curtain. That's when she saw it. A shadow moving on the rooftop across the street. A dark silhouette crouched low, holding something metallic that glinted under the moonlight. Her breath hitched. It wasn't the guard from before, and whoever it was, they were looking straight at her. The next morning, everything looked normal again, but Priscilla didn't feel normal. Her hands still shook when she made coffee. When the doorbell rang at noon, she almost screamed. Slowly, she opened it, only to find a delivery box with her name on it. No sender. She brought it inside, staring at it for a long time before cutting the tape. Inside was a black envelope sealed with a red wax stamp. the same dragon emblem she'd seen in Heijun's secret room. Her heartbeat quickened. She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single photo, her walking down the street yesterday, unaware that someone had taken it. And beneath the photo, in English, "He can't protect you forever." Her knees weakened. She dropped the envelope and staggered back. Everything in her screamed to call Heijun, but she stopped herself. He had said not to reach out unless it was an emergency. Was this an emergency? Yes. But she also remembered his confidence, his calm voice, his promise. "You're safe. Always." So she forced herself to stay still. By evening, the sky turned deep orange. She sat near the balcony door, watching the horizon. For the first time, she prayed out loud. "God, if this man is dangerous, show me. But if he's the one sent to heal me, then protect him." A soft knock interrupted her prayer. She turned, her heart froze. Heijun stood at the doorway, dressed in his black coat, his eyes darker than usual. The tattoo on his neck looked sharper in the dim light. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in days. Before she could speak, he pulled her into his arms. "I told you not to leave the house." Her voice cracked. "He sent me a picture, Heijun. Someone's watching me." He stiffened, then pulled back to look her in the eyes. "Did you touch anything in the box?" "I opened it." He swore under his breath and grabbed his phone, speaking rapid Korean to someone. His tone was low, deadly calm, the kind of voice that made men obey without question. When he hung up, he cupped her face gently. "Listen to me. From now on, you don't go anywhere alone. You stay where I can see you." Tears filled her eyes. "You're scaring me." "I know," he said softly, "but I'd rather scare you than bury you." Then his voice softened again, barely a whisper. "I won't let anyone touch you, Priscilla, even if it means burning the world down." She didn't know whether to be comforted or terrified. All she knew was that when he held her, the world stopped spinning. And for a woman who once feared love, she realized she had already fallen too deep. As she leaned into him, the night outside grew darker. Far below them, in the streets of Seoul, the man in the black coat lit a cigarette and whispered into his earpiece. "She's with him now, just like we planned."
Hello besties, the story is only getting started. Do you all need episode 2? Kindly like, subscribe and share.